Okay, welcome and hello, everyone. Welcome to the year 2017. So let's talk about what happened in 2017. So we talked in 2016, there was a presidential election, Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump, and Trump won that election. So in 2017, he is officially inaugurated on January 20th. So he is now our president. On January 21st, one day later, there was a women's march in Washington, D.C., where 500,000 to 1 million marched on Washington. They were advocating for women's rights, reproductive rights, LGBTQ rights, racial equality, and many other things. And they were also in opposition to Trump as president. One of the things we talked about in 2016 was there was some controversy during that election. One of the things that came out was the Access Hollywood tape, where he said some pretty derogatory things towards women. So that was in large part what helped to lead to their opposition of him as president. Also on January 21st, one day after the inauguration, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer, that's him up here, he tells the press that the crowd at Trump's inauguration was bigger than Obama's. It was estimated that around 450 to 600,000 people attended Trump's inauguration. It was estimated that 1.8 million people attended Obama's. It's hard to have a true number anytime you have a large gathering like that. But it was pretty clear that this statement was false, and people were just this was the first press conference called by the White House in Trump's new presidency, and people were just kind of confused, like why this would be a big deal. And one of Trump's advisors, Kellyanne Conway, she would later give interviews about this, and she would say, in response to like, well, I mean, that just was false, these different crowd numbers. And she said, well, you have your facts and we have alternative facts. And so the term alternative facts kind of moves into the lexicon, something that didn't really exist before, the idea of an alternative fact. So the big question, and the only reason that I put this in today's lesson is that if the White House was going to make an issue out of something that was provably false, like what would come next potentially? So that was kind of what the overwhelming question was after this. People were just largely confused with this whole thing. Here's a picture of the Women's March that I mentioned earlier. All right, so as a new president, you obviously then appoint your cabinet members. So his original cabinet, Secretary of State, was Rex Tillerson. Here, Jim Mattis was his Secretary of Defense. His Attorney General was Jeff Sessions. His Department of Homeland Security was John Kelly, and I don't think these are in order because anyway, his the House and Urban Development was Ben Carson down here. Health and Human Services, Tom Price. This is Tom Price, I think. Secretary of Energy was Rick Perry down here. Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos over here. His Chief of Staff was Reince Priebus. There. His ambassador to the United Nations was Nikki Haley. We mentioned her, was it 2015 when she was the governor of South Carolina, where she agreed to remove the Confederate battle flag from their flying above their state house. Head of the EPA was Scott Pruitt, which one of these guys is Scott Pruitt and the other is Tom Price, and I'm not sure which is which because I feel like they look alike. And his press secretary, his first press secretary was Sean Spicer here. Okay, so some of the things that happened within the first 110 days of Trump's presidency. Remember, the reason we tend to talk about a president's first 100 days goes all the way back to FDR and all of the things that he was able to do, especially with the New Deal then. So like all presidents after FDR are kind of judged on their first 100 days in office. So let's see what Trump did. He signed an executive order withdrawing the United States from the TPP. TPP stands for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was a trade agreement that the Obama administration had agreed to with other mostly Asian countries, as far as similar to like a NAFTA type deal that we've talked about before, kind of a free trade deal with many other Asian countries mostly. He also signed an executive order that allowed the federal government to move forward to build the Dakota Access Pipeline that had been controversial leading up to this. He also freezed all new research grants for the EPA and temporarily bans employees of the EPA from speaking to the press. He signed an executive order banning the entry of refugees and all nationals from Iran, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. The acting attorney general at the time was Sally Yates. She was a carryover from the Obama administration because the new attorney general had not been appointed yet. Trump fires her because she refused to carry out this ban. She disagreed with this ban, said that it was targeting Muslims, and she would not carry it out, and so he fired her for not carrying that out. The ban would go on to be blocked by a judge in Washington State for being unconstitutional. And if you remember when I think it was 2015, there was that terrorist attack in San Bernardino, California, and afterwards, Trump, as a candidate, said that he wanted to ban all Muslims from entering the United States. He said that in a campaign speech. That speech was used against him in this case, where the court said, you can't ban people based on their religion. And even though the Trump administration argued that this ban was not solely a Muslim ban, again, his previous words were used here to halt that ban, block that ban. We talked in 2016 about how when Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia died, President Obama nominated Merrick Garland to fill that seat, but the Senate under Majority Leader Mitch McConnell refused to hold a confirmation hearing for Merrick Garland. So when Trump wins the presidency and takes office, that is still a vacancy. So he nominates Neil Gorsuch to fill that vacant Supreme Court seat. Gorsuch is confirmed by the Senate after Majority Leader Mitch McConnell changes the rule, allowing a Supreme Court nominee to be confirmed by a simple majority. So what that means is prior to this, there are 100 members of the Senate, and you had to have at least 60 votes for a Supreme Court nominee to be passed, not just 51. By changing this rule, you now only needed to have 51 votes to get a Supreme Court nomination. The reason for the old rule was that judges typically, ideally, are supposed to be nonpartisan, meaning they're not supposed to align with either the left or the right. They're supposed to just follow the rule of law, right? And that's also the reason why they have lifetime a lifetime appointment, so that the idea being that they don't just go with the whims of elections and kind of what's popular currently. They're not fearing loss of jobs based on how they decide cases. So by having a 60 vote, needing at least 60, generally that will mean at least some members of the other party had to confirm them. So the idea meaning you'd have to pick, a more moderate person in order to get those votes, right? But by moving this to a simple majority, you can pick a more a candidate that's more on one side or the other, as long as the one side's in power and can get at least 51 votes for them, if that makes sense. So So that happens, and Neil Gorsuch is confirmed by the Senate. Trump signed an executive order to review and scale back some Dodd-Frank Wall Street reforms. The Dodd-Frank Wall Street reforms were put into place after the Great Recession in 2008. So these put extra rules in place for banks as far as how risky they could be with their investments. Trump scaled. He didn't completely gut Dodd-Frank, but scaled it back quite a bit. Remember that when we talk about 2023 and some of the bank failures we're going to see in 2023. Trump signed a revised executive order on that travel ban I had mentioned previously, and that ban again is blocked by a federal judge in Hawaii, again for those same reasons of that judge in Hawaii said it was targeting Muslims and said that was unconstitutional. And the director of the FBI, James Comey, testified in front of a House committee that the Trump campaign is under investigation for its potential ties to Russia. So basically didn't say we have proof that the campaign was tied, but he said we're investigating, we're looking into if there is a connection between the Trump campaign and Russian officials. Trump also ordered an airstrike on an airbase in Syria in response to Assad using chemical weapons. During the Obama administration, Assad in Syria had used chemical weapons on his own people. Obama had previously said that would be a red line for him, and that he which would cause military action. He would eventually not get involved, but did reach an agreement with Assad through the help of Russia, where Assad agreed to destroy his chemical weapons. Obviously, he did not do that, uses them again, and Trump launches an airstrike on Syria in response. The United States also drops the MOAB, or the mother of all bombs, on an ISIS target in Afghanistan. This is the largest non-nuclear bomb that has ever been used. ISIS, we had talked about previously, was taking over more and more ground in Iraq, and this was a way to try to fight them off a little bit. German Chancellor Angela Merkel visits the White House, and it kind of in the portion of their meeting that they do in front of the press for pictures and stuff, Trump refused to shake her hand, which caused a bit of a controversy. Trump's national security advisor that he appointed, Michael Flynn, is fired by Trump. And he said that he was fired for misleading the vice president, Mike Pence. Turns out Mike Flynn had been working with some other foreign entities before Trump took office, kind of in that kind of interim period, which is illegal. So he was trying to set up some deals for the administration before the administration officially took office. And FBI Director James Comey is fired by President Trump for mishandling the Hillary Clinton email controversy. That was the initial reason given for Comey's firing. Trump would later say in an interview that he fired Comey because of the Russia investigation into his campaign, which is going to set off a lot of red flags. So those red flags are what is going to eventually get us the special counsel investigation into the Trump campaign. So after the firing of Comey and the contradicting reasons given for the firing, and Comey's accusation that Trump asked him to drop his investigation of Mike Flynn, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, this guy here, appointed former FBI Director Robert Mueller, this guy here, to lead a special counsel investigation into the Trump campaign. Rosenstein was the one to make that decision because the current Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, recused himself of any investigations into the Trump campaign because he himself was a member of the Trump campaign. So in order to, say, hey, show a show that, I'm not going to investigate something that I was a part of, he steps aside, lets his assistant lead that, and Rosenstein made the decision to start a special counsel investigation. So the special counsel was charged with investigating the Trump campaign and any Russian or other foreign interference in the election, including exploring any possible links or coordination between Trump's campaign and the Russian governments in any matters that arose or may arise directly from the investigation. So this is going to take a couple of years to play out. I'll talk more about that as it goes. So some things that came in 2017 from this investigation. George Papadopoulos, who was a former member of the Trump campaign, pled guilty to lying to the FBI in their investigations. He would later be pardoned by Trump in 2020. Paul Manafort, who was Trump's former campaign manager, pleaded not guilty to the following: conspiracy against the United States, money laundering, unregistered agent of a foreign principal, making false and misleading statements, and filing false tax returns, 5 accounts of that, 3 accounts of failure to report foreign bank accounts, and 9 counts of bank fraud. He would go on, even though he pled not guilty, he would go on to be sentenced to 7.5 years in prison for those things. And he would later, in the year 2020, be pardoned by President Trump as well. Rick Gates, this guy here, he was a business partner of Paul Manafort. He pled guilty to conspiracy against the United States and making false statements. Michael Flynn, the fired NSA director that I mentioned a couple slides ago, he pled guilty to making false statements to the FBI. He was also pardoned by Trump in 2020. And 13 Russian citizens and 3 Russian entities were also indicted in 2017 by the special counsel investigation. Okay, so now that we have Trump in office, who's a Republican, and you also have Congress, both houses of Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate are also both controlled by Republicans. So many members of the Republican Party saw this as a chance to get rid of and replace the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. Similar to when Obama first got into office, he had Democratic control of the House and the Senate and was able to pass through the Affordable Care Act. Republicans saw this as an opportunity because they had campaigned heavily for many years against the Affordable Care Act. So they saw this as an opportunity for them to replace it. So what comes out of this is known as the American Health Care Act. This was passed by House Republicans to repeal and replace Obamacare. So some of the features of the American Health Care Act were that it would eliminate the individual mandate, basically that thing that in Obamacare that taxed you if you did not have health insurance. They also eliminated employer mandates. So under Obamacare, if you were a small business of 50 or more employees, you had to provide insurance to your employees. That would eliminate that. It also ended government subsidies of health insurance, kind of one of the big key pieces of the Affordable Care Act, and replaced them with age-based tax credits. So instead of a subsidy, so like say, the difference between a subsidy would be if, let's say my insurance premium, just to keep the math simple, just say my insurance premium on its own would cost $10, but I can't afford to pay that. The government would come in and figure out, well, since you can't afford 10, we'll cover $6 of it. So now you owe $4. So you pay $4 for your insurance instead of 10. The government covers the rest. That's a subsidy. The difference here with these age-based tax credits would be that you could write off a certain amount of your insurance on your taxes so that you would pay less taxes So you would save money that way instead of, it's kind of a different way around. But you would get more tax credits depending on how old you were. So if you were younger, you would get less. If you were older, you would get more. Also, the American Health Care Act kind of reversed the Obamacare policy, saying that they could charge older customers up to 5 times as much for insurance premiums. That was set at 3 times under the Affordable Care Act. It would also repeal taxes that the Affordable Care Act added to the wealthy. So people that made over $200,000 a year were taxed more because of the Affordable Care Act, and this would have repealed those taxes. It also said that states could opt out of mandating coverage for pre-existing conditions. One of the big key factors of the Affordable Care Act was that insurance companies couldn't drop you or refuse to cover you if you had a pre-existing condition. This said, each individual state could either keep that or drop it. It also set annual and lifetime limits on insurance and limited federal money that went to Medicaid. So this passes the House. All House Republicans were invited to the White House by President Trump, and they had a big celebration. Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, this was kind of his baby. He kind of put this thing together. So then it goes to the Senate. And that does not happen in 2017. So as of 2017, the American Health Care Act passed the House, but had to be revised in the Senate. If it passes the Senate, the revised bill will have to go back to the House for a vote. Oh, I guess that did happen in 2017. Sorry. So the bill goes to the Senate to be revised and voted on. This debate lasted for weeks. Some small changes were made. But Senate Republicans, with the Vice President Mike Pence's tie-breaking vote, were confident that they had just enough votes to pass. In a very dramatic fashion, Senator John McCain, former presidential candidate, but longtime senator, he had been absent from Congress for a while because he had brain cancer surgery. He returned for this one vote and shocked the room when he voted no. And this is a picture of him. He's about to do a thumbs down, indicating a no vote. And there's Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell standing by in disgust as McCain makes that vote. So because of McCain's no vote, the American Health Care Act only gets 49 votes in the Senate and fails to pass, meaning Obamacare remained intact. So even though I just went over all of the things that would have changed under the American Health Care Act, none of that did go through because it did not make it past the Senate. So it was voted down and it did not become law. Also in 2017, we had the Ariana Grande concert bombing. You might remember this. Many of you might remember this happening. She was performing in Manchester, England, and a suicide bomber shows up and kills 23 people and injures 500 more during the concert. The bomber initially was thought to be part of a larger terrorist cell, but evidence points to having been a solo attack and not part of a larger organization. And in 2016, we mentioned the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history happened in Orlando, Florida, at the Pulse nightclub, where 49 people were killed. That did not last long as being the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history, because in 2017, 58 people were killed and 851 more were injured when a gunman opened fire on concert goers at the Route 91 Harvest Musical Festival in Las Vegas. The concert was happening here. The shooter was up here, and he just started raining fire into the crowd, again, killing 58, injuring 851 more. Stephen Paddock fired more than 1,100 rounds from his room on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel. He then committed suicide. His motive for this to this day remains unknown. We have no idea why he would have done this. And this was another incident that re-sparked the debate over gun control and brought attention to a thing called bump stocks. A bump stock is something that you can add to your gun to make it more like an automatic weapon. So you can fire rounds, more quickly, even if your gun isn't automatically designed to do that. So there was a debate, like, should those be banned? And also the idea, when we talked about 2016, some of the questions were, should there be universal background checks? Many other things going on. This event kind of brought those debates back into public discussion again. There was an incident in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2017, where there was a rally called the Unite the Right rally. It was organized to protest the removal of a statue of Robert E. Lee from a public park. One of the organizers of this rally said that it was intended to unify the white nationalist movement. Some of the protesters chanted racist and anti-Semitic slogans. They carried rifles. They had flags with swastikas on them, as well as Confederate flags and anti-Muslim banners. And this would turn violent after protesters clashed with a group of counter-protesters. So you had this original protest, the Unite the Right rally, and then another group of people showed up that were against that group, and they clashed, and 30 people were injured in that. The very next day, a man from Ohio, who was linked to the original Unite the Right protesters, rammed his car into a group of counter-protesters, killing Heather Heyer and injuring 19 others. And the reason that this became, obviously, it was a big news event as it was, but it became an even bigger news and political story because President Trump was asked about this and commented on it. He received much criticism for his comments because he said that this was a display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides, and would later go on to say that they were very fine people on both sides. So that criticism was that he wasn't willing to call out, the side that was, being racist and anti-Semitic and others. The criticism being that he wouldn't call them out because they were people that supported him. So he was criticized heavily for his response to that event. President Trump also was able to pass the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. This was a Republican tax cut bill that was supported by President Trump. It passed the House by a vote of 227 to 203 and the Senate by a vote of 51 to 48 and was officially signed by President Trump on December 22nd, 2017. And what this did was cut the rate on top earners from 39.6% to 37%. 39.6% to 37%. So, about a 2.5 percentage drop there. And also raised the top income bracket by roughly $170,000 per year. It also permanently cut the business tax rate from 35% to 21%. It lowered the amount of state and local taxes you can deduct from your federal taxes. It lowered the tax rate on all income levels until the year 2025. It raised the standard deduction until the year of 2025. It doubled the child tax credit. It eliminated the Obamacare individual mandate. So that was a way for them through this tax cut bill to get rid of the individual mandate since the American Health Care Act didn't pass. And it also moved the estate tax. So previously, if, say you have a relative that passes away and they pass on money to you, you could get up on previously you could get up to $5.5 million given to you through the death of a family member, tax free, but that was bumped up to $11 million, so effectively doubled here. So you could get up to $11 million left to you tax free. Anything over that would be taxed. Again, doubling what it was previously at. Some other things that happened politically in 2017. Trump withdrew the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement. That was a climate change thing that the representatives from the Obama administration had agreed to join. And once it hadn't been finalized, so once Trump gets in there, he gets the United States out of it. Trump also orchestrated the release of U.S. citizen Otto Warmbier, who was being held prisoner in North Korea. Unfortunately, Warmbier would die 6 days after his return to the United States, pointing to his mistreatment. You can see here, he certainly doesn't look well. So he was, mistreated and probably fed very poorly while being detained in North Korea. So Trump is able to negotiate his release, and then he dies 6 days later. There was a movement that kind of went across sports, in particular the NFL. It's kind of started by Colin Kaepernick of the San Francisco 49ers, where they would kneel during the national anthem as a way of kind of like a silent protest against police mistreatment of African Americans. And Trump criticized NFL players for doing that. Trump pardoned Joe Arpaio. He was a former sheriff in Arizona who also was in kind of control of the prison system there, and he had been accused of mistreating prisoners, and so Trump officially pardoned him. And then Roy Moore, this guy here, lost a special election that was held to fill the vacant Senate seat left vacant by Jeff Sessions when he became Attorney General. He lost that to Democrat Doug Jones in Alabama, which was a big shock because Alabama is typically very red, very Republican. But Roy Moore was such an extreme candidate. At one point, this is him literally brandishing a gun during a campaign rally. So, he was kind of seen as being a little too extreme, even for Alabama. So his opponent, Democrat Doug Jones, won that special election. Some other major events of 2017. We had a solar eclipse where you're not supposed to look directly into the sun during a solar eclipse. So keep that in mind. It could damage your eyesight if it happens again. Hurricane Harvey hits Houston, the city of Houston, Texas, very hard. Houston, Texas, very hard. We actually had a string of 3 hurricanes in a row. Hurricane Irma slammed the Caribbean, and Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico. Republican Congressman Steve Scalise here, this guy, is shot during a congressional softball practice. So there was like a tradition of this softball game between Congress, a Republican team and a Democratic team of members of Congress. And during a practice, Congressman Steve Scalise was shot. He did recover. He's alive. He's still in Congress today. And also we saw the rise to prominence of the Me Too, the hashtag Me Too movement, regarding women and kind of how many women were treated. It kind of started in the entertainment industry, but then kind of ballooned and talked about women being mistreated in the workplace and in many other facets of life. So I'm sure you might remember hearing about the Me Too movement. These are some of the people we lost in 2017. One of my another all-time favorite of mine, Tom Petty. He passed away. Chris Cornell, lead singer of the band Soundgarden, and also the band Audio Slave. He passed away in 2017. Oh my gosh. Johnny B. Good. Oh my gosh, why am I blanking? Oh, this is so bad. Oh man, I feel like an idiot. Famous rock and roll pioneer. We've played his music in this class before, and I'm just having like a total brain lapse moment on his name, but I'm sure you all recognize him. Chester from Linkin Park. He died in 2017 as well, lead singer of Linkin Park. Adam West, who played Batman in like I think the 60s or 70s TV series. Also, you might recognize him if you're fans of Family Guy. He's the mayor of Quahog, Adam West. He passed away in 2017. And actor Bill Paxton. He died in 2017 as well. All right, checkpoint. What is the name of the new healthcare bill that passed the House in order to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act? The Universal Health Care Act, the American Health Care Act, the U.S. Health Care Act, or Obamacare? And American Health Care Act is the correct response here. Who did President Trump fire on May 9th for his handling of the Hillary Clinton email scandal? Was that Attorney General Jeff Sessions, Acting Attorney General Sally Yates, National Security Advisor Mike Flynn, or FBI Director James Comey? And that is FBI Director James Comey. And then he would later go on to contradict why he fired James Comey. Why did Attorney General Jeff Sessions recuse himself from leading the investigation of any potential involvement between the Trump campaign and any foreign entity? Is it because he is from Russia? Was it because he was involved in the campaign? Was it because Vladimir Putin is his second cousin, or he was not involved in the campaign? This is like my favorite. But yeah, he's not Vladimir Putin's second cousin. It's because he was involved in the campaign. Okay, that's 2017. This is what I was up to. Went to New York City. My first time visiting New York City. This is my niece, Brooke. She, in 2017, survived and beat cancer. And she was a senior in high school, and she won homecoming queen. I think she was still this was still in the middle of her chemo, or towards the end of it, maybe. But she is good and still cancer-free to this day. So we're very grateful for that. This is me. You might remember that I play ice hockey. I was able to play a game at Joe Louis Arena, which is where the Red Wings used to play. Did for many, many years until they moved to a new arena after 2017. So it was really cool for me to play on that ice. This is my wife and I dressed up as characters from The Walking Dead for Halloween. We called her Sheegan instead of Negan, and I was Carl. And then this is us at an event. Look at my top hat. Bringing it back. All right. Have a great day, everybody. And we'll see you for 2018.